This is Jilliana Ranicar-Breese, and this is part 6, and we're competing with the Imam. So, go ahead, Stuart.
Okay. So,
We're going to talk about Tangier.
so I moved from China actually now after being there on and off for 10 years in Shanghai and in Hong Kong, and I did a stint in Bangkok too. I noticed what happened is the Chinese had us over to develop advertising there, and then once it started, they do this in a lot of businesses. They basically have copied and gotten everything that they can get out of you, and then they start hiring locals who are 80% cheaper than me. So I found it harder to keep the position.
But you decided to retire anyway.
But I decided to retire anyway, and also I was sort of, China can be a really tough place to live, and they're very difficult, tough cookies and difficult customers. So I decided to move back to the States, or back to the West.
But you decided to retire and come to Morocco because you'd always loved Morocco.
I love Morocco. Actually,
was it just Tangier, or
I love Morocco, but Tangier is my favorite city here.
Right.
I love Fez a lot too, but the weather, the beaches, and also the history of the place, this tradition of not only of artists and writers, and that was very appealing to me. And I told you when I was 14, I read The Sheltering Sky.
And have you read all the other
I've read all the
writers? I mean, Kerouac was here as well,
yeah.
William Burroughs.
I like the beats. I think Bowles is not really a beat, but I particularly liked his work because there's something odd about his work. His work is strange, and I think he really captures this sort of almost mysterious and magical aura of this place and this culture. And I've only been here for a year and a half. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Are you going to try and write, perhaps?
I am definitely going to try to write, but I think I would write about my life in New York. I'm kind of getting to the age where it would be almost a memoir.
Yes.
And also it's also a parable about how the art world became the art market, and how drastic that change was.
And what about the Moroccan art market? Have you...
So I've been looking into it. There isn't much of a market here for art. Most of the art, there's just a handful of galleries here, and it's really marketed to tourists, and it's very pretty. There's no real idea behind it. It's usually very boring.
Are there any art collectors, Moroccan art collectors here?
I haven't run into many. Actually, my landlord's brother has a gallery, but and it's probably much higher end than any of the other galleries here. It's called Gallery Tinduf. But he has artists that were here in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
And he has some Moroccan artists, but he's like, one of my favorite artists is a guy named Brian Geisen, and it's really hard to find Geisens now because
an American who lived here in the 50s.
American who lived here in the 50s and 60s and 70s, here and in Paris, and he was actually a really good friend of William Burroughs, and he did beautiful work. And he also had a restaurant called 1001 Nights. He's also a writer. And the work is really gorgeous, but it's really hard to find now because he's been discovered. Actually, when I first came here in the 80s...
so you don't have one of his
I don't have one of his work. I saw a piece in the 80s, and this was my last stop on my trip, and I sort of had depleted most of my money, so I couldn't buy it. I think it was $6,000 for that. Basically, it was a little painting, and now I'm kicking myself for not buying it because he had a major show in New York at the New Museum, and his work has skyrocketed. But again, everything in New York has skyrocketed in prices. Actually, I just have been pruning my collection, and I'm finding I'm really not interested in figurative anymore, and I bought some figurative work mostly
You could sell it?
well, mostly to support the artists who are working or were just starting their careers. And I've always actually gravitated to young artists and help young artists start their career. Actually, what I often did with them is because a lot of these artists are very nonverbal and non-strategic, I would help them write their resume, help them write their artist statement, and then they would often give me a piece of work. Or actually, I helped a lot of people get into galleries by introducing them to gallerists and gallerists to artists who fit with their gallery in terms of
that's in New York.
In New York, and mostly in spirit and thought, and just in terms of their ideas. And so I'd like to continue doing that here now that I'm in Tangier.
And you have the time.
And I have the time. And so there are a few art organizations that are just starting. There's a printmaking studio that's near the fish market that just started. And I'm finding the artists there are doing the most interesting work. And they're not selling to tourists.
And can you work with the American legation here, perhaps?
I probably could do a show there. So I'm in the state. It's just an emerging group of people who are starting to do interesting work. There was a gallery in New York called Alleged Gallery, and I got to know the owner really well. And I bought a piece from every one of his shows. And he'd have a show every month for over a period of 10 years. And I got to meet some of my best friends through that gallery, but I also supported the gallery in terms of defining their direction.
So you might have a gallery here yourself?
I might have a gallery here myself, but I might, like one of the Bubka is the guy who has Tandif, and I said I'd like to curate, he's got 2 huge windows, and he hasn't changed the art in those windows for like 5 years.
Oh, so you could work with him. He's already got what's the name of the gallery?
Gallery Tindif. And so I said, I'd like to curate these 2 windows.
Okay.
So I can put a display and set up a display. So I'd go through the work that he has in his gallery and basically have an opening. It's sort of a big foyer and have an opening there.
That would be
and
perfect,
invite people to
wouldn't
do
it?
that.
So you've got to have a mission. So just to end, what is your mission now that you're here?
Well, one is to understand this culture, and another would be to help support the arts here. It's an emerging community, and I really want to help it grow and develop.
Because it's a new decade, 2020. So
new decade, new country, new culture, and new people.
Well, I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
And nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.